Hey everyone, how's it going? I thought today I would talk about a little informal tradition that's developed in my life over the holiday season. And this is a tradition where every holiday season I pick a really big, as in really thick, classic book to read. So usually somewhere from just before Christmas to after the New Year. Sometimes I do finish the book in the year where Christmas happens, but often I take until the New Year to finish it. But it's this tradition where I read a really big classic over the holiday season. And I didn't start it intentionally. I didn't think one year, like, wouldn't it be fun if I did this every year? But there just eventually came a point where I realized that it was a thing that I kept doing, and so now I have turned it into a more formal thing where every year I'm like, ooh, holiday season is coming up, I need my big Chunkster to read. And so it's become this thing that I almost sometimes agonize over a little bit. Like, I write up lists and I come up with crazy ways to, determine what book I'm going to read. And since I joined BookTube, in at least one instance, what I read was determined by buddy reads, actually, and I'll get to that. But basically, it's just become a big tradition for me. And again, I didn't start it with any kind of intention. So back in 2016, it was my senior year of college, and I decided that I wanted to read Moby Dick. And I didn't consciously decide to read it over the holiday season or anything. It just so happened that I decided I wanted to read Moby Dick, and it happened to be the holiday season. So I read Moby Dick over the course of my winter break. And I believe I finished it on New Year's Eve, and that was a really fun experience. I think I finished it at like 10:30 p.m. To be able to read it before the start of the new year. And I was just blown away by Moby Dick. I just absolutely loved it. And then the next year, again with no conscious intention, I ended up reading The Brothers Karamazov over the holiday season. And that was also just fantastic. It was just, I was blown away by this book. It is such a magnificent novel. And then the year after that, I ended up, again, at this point there was still no real intention about it, but I decided to read Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is not quite as big as the other two, and not as big as some of the other books I'm going to talk about here. But for those who have read it, you know that it kind of feels longer than it is, because it does read a little bit slowly. I love Paradise Lost. I also loved it when I read it, but it definitely does kind of read slowly. And so I read this in 2018, and then by 2019, it had become a more conscious thing. I had realized that it was something that I just tended to do. And so that's the first year where I, agonized over it. What I'm going to read for this tradition has become something that I, think about a lot and, almost agonize over sometimes. But that year, I ended up, sort of on a whim, deciding to read Ulysses by James Joyce. That was a lot of fun. Really, it's a tough read, but I think it's totally worth it. It's such a fun, interesting book. And then last year was the first year where what I read was determined by buddy reads. And I just happened to schedule 2 buddy reads of 2 really big classic works around the holiday season. And I've now made it a policy that I don't do buddy reads in December and January, so that I'm not having to buddy read during that time, so that I can get my Chunkster read. And because it's always nice to have 2 months where you're totally free of buddy reads. But last year, I actually read 2 books, and I don't know if I would recommend that, but the 2 books were David Copperfield by Charles Dickens and Middlemarch by George Eliot. And I did enjoy David Copperfield a fair amount, but Middlemarch just was phenomenal. It's great. And so that was wonderful. Reading them concurrently was fun as well, even though it was a little bit overwhelming with the Victorian literature and such. And, it's fun because these books take on associative links with the holiday season. When I look at The Brothers Karamazov or Moby Dick or Ulysses, I think about what I was doing in those over the time when I was reading it. The fun times I had with my family and such. And so they take on associations that just give me warm feelings. So I'm continuing the tradition this year, and I haven't finalized what I'm picking, but I think what I'm going to read is something a little bit different. And what I think I'm going to read is this. The Books of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a really big illustrated bind-up of all the Earthsea novels. And I've already read the first 2, which means that I've already read a big chunk of this book, so really it's going to end up probably being like 700-something pages of it that I read. But I think I'll pick this because it's certainly a classic of fantasy literature, at least. And I've been getting more into fantasy and science fiction this year. But another big reason why I think I want to pick this is just because it's been a rough year for a lot of us, I think, and certainly it has been for me. And so whatever I pick this year, I want to just be easy and fun and enjoyable. I don't want to be reading, Ulysses, where you have to read a whole second book to get what's going on in Ulysses or something like that. I want it to be enjoyable. It's just something that it is good, is very well done and, interesting, but isn't something that takes a lot out of you to read on a page-by-page basis, and that will be enjoyable still. And I think this qualifies. So I think this will be what I read this year. But if I end up reading something else, then don't be too surprised. But I think I'm pretty well decided that this will be it. So anyway, I just wanted to make a little video about this because it's such a fun little tradition, and I love it. And I'd be curious to hear if you have any traditions of your own that have to do with books over the holidays. Like, do you read certain kinds of books? Do you do something like this where you read a big book, or do you do anything bookish? Is there a certain book that you reread every year at the holidays? Some people, I think, read A Christmas Carol every year. Let me know if you have any traditions like this. I would love to hear. But anyway, I will leave it at that, and talk to you all later.